Hi there, everybody. My name is Michael, and I'm just a Kansas boy. Also, hey ystävät to those of you watching from Finland. Thank you so much for joining us. And today, I'm going to be watching a video about Tolkien and Finland. In my last video on the Finnish language, some of you were getting into the comments and you mentioned that J.R.R. Tolkien was actually strongly influenced by Finnish, the Finnish language, when he was creating his Elvish language. He loved it so much that he decided to base one of his own languages on it. And he also based a lot of his stories on some of the themes and characters that were in Finnish folklore. Now, as a big Tolkien fan myself, that got me really excited, and I was wanting to learn more about it. So that's what we're going to do today. The creator of today's video is Antimation, and he gave me permission to react to this, and so thank you very much for that. Please go to his channel. You can find a link in the description. Check out the other stuff that he's done. He's got some really cool animation videos where you can learn even more about Finnish folklore. But today, we're going to be checking out how Middle Earth is similar to Finland. Let's go.
Finns love to celebrate whenever our country or culture is mentioned in foreign media, which is why it's surprising how little it is emphasized that Middle Earth is basically Finnish. Well, at least largely inspired by Finnish mythology. The uniqueness and the brutal side of the Finnish myths had a huge influence on Professor Tolkien and his work in fiction. And since the disappointingly below mediocre Rings of Power is now evoking discussion on the Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, and Tolkien's Legendarium, let's meet at the Market Square and see which Finnish myths have influenced Tolkien's world and Middle Earth.
No comment on the Amazon series.
Obviously, some of the influences are easier to spot than others, so I'm not going to list every similarity I can think of. Also, several ingredients in Tolkien's soup can be found not only in Finnish myths but across Northern Europe or the world. Moreover, we know that Tolkien read the Kalevala, Finland's national epic, but wasn't necessarily familiar with other versions of old Finnish tales. This video is not going to include the most common, boring comparisons like Gandalf being Väinämöinen. Besides the sage Väinämöinen, Gandalf was inspired by several other mythical heroes from Europe. My list is by no means complete, and if you notice something missing, I would love to see your thoughts and prayers in the comments. Let's go! Well,
Okay, so it sounds like this video is focused on some of the more obscure connections, and honestly, I'm not even familiar with some of the really obvious connections, so I may have to go learn more about that. But I really like how he's diving deep into it, and absolutely Tolkien knew a lot about mythology from all sorts of different places, so I'm sure he really combined a lot of it when he was creating his story, but we'll see just how much of it came from Finland.
Well, I mentioned Väinämöinen, so the guy cannot go unaddressed now. The more obvious counterpart than Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings is of course everyone's favorite, Tom Bombadil himself. Bombadil is a mysterious figure who has been around since the beginning of times. He is much like Väinämöinen, who in some runes takes part in the creation of the world itself. He is often thought to be the most powerful being in Middle Earth after Sauron in The Lord of the Rings, while Väinämöinen is perhaps the most powerful character in Kalevala. Both of them can control nature with their singing, which Bombadil uses to save Frodo and the other hobbits in the Fellowship of the Ring. Reciting powerful runes by singing plays a major role in Kalevala, and Väinämöinen is a master of this art.
That's really interesting how song is such an important part of so many different countries' folklore, but how singing is important to Kalevala as well. I'm going to have to dig more into Kalevala. This is fascinating.
The god in Tolkien's universe is called Eru Ilúvatar. Now, if we change a few letters, we can see where the name clearly comes from.
Ilmatar. spirit of the air,
begins the process of the creation of the world in the Kalevala. The creation, as told in the Silmarillion, starts from pretty much nothing, an empty void, very much like in Kalevala. Of course, Ilúvatar is a counterpart of the Christian God, as Tolkien was Catholic himself, which makes the fusion of the Bible with heathen runes in order to create a supreme god in his fictional world rather amusing.
That is an interesting combination that he, I know he set out when he was creating Lord of the Rings to create what he called English and English mythology, because he felt that England didn't have their own strong mythology. And so maybe that's partly why he did that. He was combining some of his personal beliefs with mythology from other places.
In Kalevala, the heroes attempt to court the beautiful daughter of the north. In order to gain the parents' acceptance, they have to complete impossible, dangerous tasks. In Tolkien's world, the mortal man Beren has to fetch one of the gems called the Silmarils from the Dark Lord Morgoth's iron crown and present it as bride price.
It's been a long time since I've read the Silmarillion, so I don't remember it very well, but I do remember that. And that right here where it says tasks for Ilmarinen is plow a field of vipers, slay the wolf and bear of the underworld, and catch the pike of the underworld. Is that pike as in the fish?
For the creation of the elven language of Quenya, Tolkien used Old Poetic Finnish as a starting point. The language, just like Finnish, is loaded with suffixes. Even the pronunciation is similar to Finnish. Moreover, the name of the language itself could derive from the Quens, an old word for historical and mythical inhabitants of regions of modern-day Finland.
So even Quenya, the Elvish language, was based more on ancient poetic Finnish, is what he said. So how different is that from modern Finnish, I wonder? And can you, those of you who maybe are a bit more involved in learning about Tolkien and his world, do you know enough? Can you see how similar those two languages are, or is that more of an obscure connection?
Ilmarinen was likely an ancient Finnish god of the skies, but in the later centuries became a heroic blacksmith. In the Kalevala, he gets credit for forging the sun and moon, just like Aule in Tolkien's world. As if the sun and moon wouldn't be enough for one smith's resume, Ilmarinen goes on to forge the Sampo, a magical instrument that brings prosperity to its owner. Sampo is a key motif in the Kalevala and gets stolen and fought over and is ultimately lost. Does that sound familiar? Sampo-like motifs in Tolkien's universe include the Silmarils, the magical gems forged by Fëanor, an ancient elven craftsman. They also get stolen, fought over, and lost. Besides the Silmarils, the One Ring is a very similar motif to the Sampo. It gives immense power to its owner, gets fought over, and ultimately destroyed.
He said it was an instrument. As in a musical instrument, or just a tool or something like that? If it was a musical instrument, again, that's really fascinating how important music is in the folklore.
The realm of Angband, fortress of Morgoth, the big bad guy and Sauron's master, has a lot of similarities to Pohjola, evil northern realm in Kalevala, as suggested by Anu Vehkomäki in her thesis. Both are cold, remote and evil places where no one goes without good reason and great risk. They are ruled by evil sorcerers Louhi and Morgoth and guarded by beasts and monsters. The entire Kalevala is written in an ancient runic measure, and the poems were recited by singing. Not surprisingly, The Lord of the Rings contains countless pages of singing. Divine music also plays a central part in the creation of the world, both in Kalevala as well as Middle Earth.
Really?
Just like Gandalf gets rescued by the eagle Gwaihir, Väinämöinen gets saved by an eagle after being shot at and almost drowned in the sea. Neither of them casually summon the eagle as an easy way to get out of trouble. The eagles are beings with a will of their own, and sometimes choose to help out the heroes when they happen to be around.
Okay, those of you who are familiar with some of the Tolkien world know just how big of a debate that can be about, well, why didn't they fly the eagles to Mordor? And there's so many arguments about that. It's kind of ridiculous in some ways, but that's interesting how that actually influences how that's actually based on the mythology. I never would have guessed that.
The darkest of Tolkien's stories is that of Túrin, which is no wonder since it's basically a retelling of the Finnish story of Kullervo. Túrin's story has none of the adventurous spirit of The Hobbit, nor the positivity of The Lord of the Rings. Just like Kullervo's story, it is extremely tragic, with an anti-hero cursed since his birth. The heroes go on trying to escape the curse, only to end up causing death and destruction wherever they go, accidentally committing incest with their sisters, who then kill themselves, and finally committing suicide by their own talking swords. Just like the heroes and elves departing from...
That's, after doing my first video on the history of Finland, I got an email from someone who's Finnish and has done so much research on some of these things. And she sent me an English translation of part of Sibelius's Kullervo, as well as a summary of the story itself. And it's a very tragic, very dark story. I had never made that connection because, again, I don't remember the story of Túrin that well, but that's interesting how close those stories are. And I do remember reading it and thinking that it felt very dark for Tolkien.
From the Grey Havens at the end of The Lord of the Rings, so does Väinämöinen. They depart our world and may never be seen again, as the sea voyage symbolizes the end. Which brings us to the end of this video. With his work, Tolkien wanted to give England its own Kalevala, a collection of national myths that had not been preserved other than Celtic tales. And given how popular his work has become, I think it is fair to say that he did alright. Or even beyond that, as his legendarium is enjoyed by people not only in England but pretty much everywhere. Were there some influences of Finnish myths that I didn't mention? Share your thoughts and prayers in the comments. And if videos like this and Finnish mythology are close to your heart, check out my other videos or even consider subscribing to the channel.
Alrighty, well, thanks for joining me on that. That was really interesting, and I learned a lot about Tolkien as well as the similarities between Finnish mythology and his mythology. And I'm going to have to go back and read through the Silmarillion again because I'm not very familiar with it, I guess. At this point, I've forgotten a lot. I'm going to have to do another video on the language because he didn't touch on the languages too much, and I want to hear some of the similarities between the Quenya and the Finnish language. I love the sound of listening to things like that, so I'm going to do that in the future. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for joining me. Always remember to try and learn something new every single day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.